Friday, February 28, 1997. Two robbers, hell-bent on making life imitate art, stormed into Bank of America in North Hollywood, Los Angeles at 9:17 a.m. with a mission in mind: to pull off the most ambitious heist of their criminal careers. Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Matasareanu, inspired by the 1995 movie Heat, had prepared meticulously for the 211. Armed with assault rifles, an arsenal that would make a soldier blush, their plan was to break into the bank's vault, steal the money, and escape. However, things didn't go as planned. They were spotted by patrolling LAPD officers upon entering the bank, and faced with police presence outside who had set up a barricade, they realized they were trapped and made a ferocious decision: to fight. Thus began one of the longest and most violent shootouts in U.S. bank robbery history, a confrontation that lasted 44 minutes and came to be known as the North Hollywood Shootout. Development. On the day of the shooting, Larry Phillips Jr. and Emil Matasareanu, aged 27 and 30 respectively, engaged the police in a battle that lasted nearly an hour, and in which some 2,000 bullets were fired. The robbers had an arsenal far superior to that of the police, but was it enough to save their lives? For a year and a half, Phillips and Matasareanu carried out a series of successful bank robberies that caused alarm in Los Angeles and even attracted the attention of the FBI. However, they were not always considered the most dangerous bank robbers of their time. Their history goes back much further. Larry Phillips Jr. Larry Eugene Phillips Jr. was born on September 27, 1970 in Los Angeles, California, the only child of Dorothy Clay and his father, Larry Phillips Sr., who'd become his son's main role model. During his youth, Larry Phillips Sr. had several run-ins with the law, the most notable being his escape from the Colorado State Hospital on April 18, 1969. How he managed to do this is a mystery, although the labyrinth of tunnels beneath the state mental institution likely provided the escape route. And although Larry Jr.'s childhood was relatively normal, it wasn't long before his father's criminal tendencies began to influence him. In 1985, at the age of 6, Larry Jr. witnessed his father's arrest by federal agents, an event that would leave an indelible mark on his personality and worldview. Over time, Larry Jr.'s parents divorced, but that didn't stop Larry Sr. from remaining his son's primary role model. They went to shooting ranges together, enjoyed wrestling matches, and took trips to the Rocky Mountains, where Larry Sr. instilled a disdain for rules and laws, unwittingly planting the seeds of a turbulent future in his son's mind. Phillips Jr. dropped out of school in the 9th grade and went on a quest for easy money. During this time, he met his friend's sister, Sharon Santos, and became interested in bodybuilding, dreaming of becoming the next Arnold Schwarzenegger or Lee Haney. It wasn't until 1989, at the age of 19, that things started to go downhill. His girlfriend got pregnant, and he had been arrested and tried for the first time after stealing $400 worth of suits from a Sears store in Alhambra. If his intention was to look sharp for job interviews, an arrest would ruin his job prospects. Jr. would soon meet his partner, Emil Matasareanu. Emil Matasareanu was born on July 19, 1966, in Timisoara, Romania, a country in Eastern Europe that was going through a severe socio-political crisis at the time, after Nicolae Ceausescu's communist regime took over. Emil's parents, Viorel and Valerie, were political dissidents who openly opposed the communist regime as much as they could. In 1978, husband Viorel and young Emil joined their mother Valerie and emigrated to Los Angeles. Once in the United States, Matasareanu was harassed by other students. They teased him about his accent and his weight. These circumstances, combined with his epilepsy due to a congenital heart disease, made him a rather reclusive young man who preferred to retreat into his computer or ride his old motorbike. In 1985, he enrolled at the DeVry Institute of Technology, where he earned a 3-year degree in electronic engineering. In 1987, at the age of 21, he graduated with a degree in electronics and started a business with varying degrees of success. At the same time, his interests were expanding, and he began to take an interest in firearms. The meeting and the first alarm. Sometime around 1989, Emil Matasareanu and Larry Phillips Jr. met at a Gold's Gym, most likely at their local Pasadena location. Although many accounts say it was at the Venice Beach Gym, this is unlikely since they lived 25 miles from Venice. Due to their common interest in bodybuilding and firearms, they became fast friends. However, it would be another 8 years before these two men became professional robbers. Phillips was the first to try to cheat the law. In September 1992, he traveled to Colorado and devised a fraud scheme using the alias Mark Wright. Phillips would contact local real estate agents and pretend to be an interested buyer. Using this con, he was able to get real estate agents to show him approximately 50 properties in Colorado. Once there, he would memorize the combination to the lockbox containing the house keys. He'd then pretend to be the owner of these properties that was renting them. On October 6th, Phillips, operating under his alias, met with Cheryl Meyer, a Denver woman who had found an advertisement for one of his homes for rent. Meyer filled out a lease and was later approved by Phillips to rent the property. The goal was to get the deposit money in cash. However, when she and her husband Steven visited the house, they ran into the real owner, who confirmed that the house was not for rent, but for sale, and that a RE/MAX agent was the authorized seller. After discovering the scam, the Meyers contacted the RE/MAX agent and suggested setting up a meeting with Phillips to trap him. Phillips took the bait and was arrested by Denver police, who helped set up the sting. He was only released because his wife intervened on his behalf and used their savings to post bail. The situation severely strained Phillips' relationship with his wife, who already had 2 children, and in early November of 1992, he abandoned his family. Phillips Jr. would also skip out on his court date and flee Colorado, heading for California, a fugitive on the run, like father, like son. In October 1993, the duo found themselves under the scrutiny of authorities for the first time. This happened after an undercover detective spotted them operating a rental car, a red 1993 Ford Thunderbird. Detective Ian Grimes began questioning the suspects and quickly realized they weren't telling the whole truth. Phillips, claiming he had left his driver's license at home, refused to surrender it. When Detective Grimes asked who owned the vehicle, Mata Serrano interjected, stating that it belonged to Phillips' mother. Cops never heard that one before. Grimes ordered the 2 men out of the car. He noticed that Phillips had a Glock 17 with an extended 33-round magazine around his waist. Mata Serrano tried to hide his gun under the seat before getting out, but it was too late. After their arrest and a thorough search, a wide range of weapons were found in the vehicle. Rifles, handguns, ammunition, smoke bombs, explosive devices, tactical gear, a sum of money, and even hair dye. Larry Phillips was charged with conspiracy to commit robbery, grand theft auto, illegal possession of firearms, and giving a false name to authorities. Despite the evidence against them, both men were sentenced to less than 1 year in county jail on December 27, 1993. However, their sentences were ultimately reduced to 99 and 72 days in jail, respectively, along with 36 days of probation for each. The AK47 Bandits. On June 14, 1995, shortly after their release, Larry Phillips and Emil Mataserrano attracted media attention. At 12:30 p.m. in the parking lot of a Bank of America in Winnetka, they targeted an armored Brinks truck. The truck stopped to make a delivery, and as one guard walked back to the vehicle, Phillips and Mataserrano opened fire. This first robbery was successful. They allowed the thieves to steal about $120,000. One of the drivers, a 53-year-old armed guard, was critically wounded, though he was luckier than his colleague, Herman Cook, 51, who died from his injuries. The attack reverberated throughout the community and attracted the attention of the FBI and the media, who dubbed them the AK-47 Bandits. It wasn't long before they struck again in the Woodland Hills area on March 27, 1996. Less than a year later, on March 27, 1996, at 9:33 a.m., a moving armored vehicle belonging to the Brinks Company was attacked by a pair of thieves who opened fire from a maroon Ford Econoline. Although it cannot be confirmed it was them, since the unprofessional MO didn't fit. The investigation suggested it was likely. However, the robbers were described by some witnesses as black. Either way, they failed, burning the van in an alley and fleeing. By that year, Mataserrano's marriage had deteriorated after suffering a seizure caused by his epilepsy and other health problems. His wife Christina left him, taking their child Emil Jr. with her. Just 2 months later, at 10 in the morning, Phillips and Mataserrano stormed the Bank of America branch in the Van Nuys area. They forced their way into the building, fired shots into the ceiling as a warning, and looted the vault. Between 6 and 8 minutes later, the robbers had made off with over $755,048, a monumental sum for a few minutes' work. But it wasn't enough. Their second hit came 29 days later, at 10:05 a.m. on May 31st. That day, Phillips and Mataserrano again stormed the Bank of America branch in Winnetka, armed with high-caliber rifles and protected by bulletproof vests. The protocol was the same: screams, gunshots in the air, and a hasty escape. The haul, about $794,000. The North Hollywood Shootout. In less than a month, Phillips and Mataserrano had amassed more than $1.5 million. To put that in perspective, adjusted for inflation, in 2024, that would easily be over $3 million in Southern California. Enough money to retire or lay low. The thieves had not only amassed a massive amount of money, but had also become the primary target of the police and the FBI, who were determined to apprehend these elusive criminals by any means necessary. They went from being called the AK47 Bandits to the High Incident Bandits. The police and banking institutions stepped up their precautions and security measures considerably. For a few months, it seemed that the thieves had had enough. However, on Friday, February 28, 1997, after taking a few months off and replenishing their arsenal, the duo carried out their most notorious act. Their target was the 384th branch of Bank of America in North Hollywood. This was by far the largest bank in the area and their most ambitious target to date. If everything went according to plan, they would score $750,000, or so they thought. At 9:17 a.m., after taking phenobarbital to calm their nerves, which was most likely Matasaranou's anti-seizure medication, Phillips and Matasaranou jumped out of their 1987 Chevrolet Celebrity, burst into the bank, firing shots into the ceiling and announcing their robbery with unbridled fury. But fate had other plans. LAPD officers Martin Perello and Lauren Farrell were on a routine patrol when they stumbled upon the scene. Perello called it in, and within seconds their escape was sabotaged. Inside the bank, the gunmen took control and opened fire. Their targets, the vault and teller drawers. From that point on, things only got worse. When they inspected the vault, they found that it contained far less money than they had expected. The men gathered what little cash they could find and made a quick getaway. But their emotions eventually got the better of them. In a desperate act, Matasaranou emptied a drum magazine into the vault, destroying a lot of the money. Their total earnings from all this only got them $303,000 and 3 little die packs stowed away in their bag. Phillips and Matasaranou soon realized that the police must have cordoned off the area. It was eerily quiet outside, and the normally busy street was devoid of people or vehicles. The officers took up positions outside the bank, expecting the robbers to barricade themselves inside, but that didn't work out the way they had hoped. This time, the robbers were heavily armed, equipped with Norinco rifles with full automatic conversions, Chinese drums with 75-round magazines, 2 Beretta semi-automatic pistols, Bushmaster XM15s, and full-body Kevlar bulletproof armor. They even wore gloves with stopwatches sewn into them, just like in the movie Heat. It was at this moment that Phillips exited the bank at 9:24 a.m. Seeing Sergeant Haynes and Officer Whitfield, as well as 3 nearby civilians all about 200 feet away, Phillips opened fire on Haynes and Whitfield's patrol cars, blanketing both cruisers with bullets. The gunfire alerted nearby civilians and panic ensued. Phillips continued firing for several minutes, eventually wounding 7 officers, including Sergeant Dean Haynes, Officers Martin Whitfield, James Aborovan, Stuart Guy, and Detectives Tracy Angeles, William Krulak, and 3 civilians. Most of them hid behind a locksmith kiosk, which the bullets easily tore through. Phillips also began firing up at a police helicopter, forcing them to retreat to a safer altitude. Because of Phillips' bulletproof armor, the officers couldn't take him down with their handguns. Even Officer Zaborovan's pump-action Ithaca Model 37 shotgun proved to be ineffectual. Zaborovan was shot 4 times, twice in his back and Krulak once in the ankle, forcing them to retreat to a dentist office nearby to get their wounds treated. Soon, Detective Tracy Angeles and Stuart Guy were also wounded, the latter critically injured, and some time passed before both were rescued by fellow LAPD, maneuvering their patrol vehicle. It was around this time that a small squad of cops were dispatched to a local gun store, where they were loaned M16s to match the robbers' immense firepower. As 4 SWAT team members arrived, Donnie Anderson, Steve Gomez, Peter Wereder, and Richard Massa, Phillips retreated back into the bank. He later reappeared with Matasaranou, carrying a large bag containing the stolen money. However, the 3 die packs in the bag were remotely activated, ruining the money and their goal of making off with the loot. They soon began to strut to their getaway vehicle to flee. At that moment, Matasaranou was shot twice, once in the right buttock and in the left forearm. Phillips, meanwhile, walked point beside the slowly moving Chevy, covering his buddy with a Heckler & Koch M91A3. During this approximate time, police gunfire struck the HK91, rendering it inoperable. Phillips discarded it and rearmed himself with a Norinco Type 56. Some SWAT team members commandeered an armored truck to begin rescuing hostages from the bank. At 9:52 a.m., Phillips and Matasareanu separated on Archwood Street, while officers scrambled to surround them. Phillips positioned himself behind a parked semi-truck, continuing to engage the police. Phillips' Norinco jammed several times. Perhaps feeling the side effects of the phenobarbital, he showed signs of confusion and lack of coordination. Unable to clear the jam because of a gunshot wound to his left wrist, he dropped the rifle and drew a Beretta 92FS pistol, which he began firing. He was then shot in the right hand by Officer Conrado Torres, causing him to drop the pistol. After retrieving it, Phillips placed the muzzle under his chin and fired. Some say his Beretta discharged accidentally since he was fumbling with it with injured hands. As he fell, Officer John Caparelli shot him in the upper torso, severing his spine. There's controversy as to what truly resulted in lights out for Phillips, a self-inflicted gunshot wound or Officer Caparelli's shot to the spine. Meanwhile, Matasareanu, who had begun driving down Archwood Street at the time of Phillips' death, decided to abandon the block of Swiss cheese that was his Chevrolet. He wanted to steal another vehicle because his car had been damaged so bad by police gunfire. Crossing paths with a 1963 Jeep Gladiator, he shot at the driver and carjacked him. His plan was thwarted since the fleeing owner of the Jeep sneakily engaged the kill switch. It was William Marr, an aerospace engineer who was trying to get to work at Van Nuys Airport in his 1963 Jeep pickup, but had to change his route due to the police blockade caused by the shooting. Matasareanu shot Marr, wounding him and forcing him to flee on foot. Marr then tried to enter the home of Dora Lubjansky, who mistook him for an intruder and alerted the police. This led to the mistaken belief that Marr was a potential third shooter at large. It was at this moment that three members of the SWAT team screeched to a halt and engaged Matasareanu in gunfire. SWAT officer Donnie Anderson fired his AR-15 below the cars and wounded Matasareanu in his foot and lower legs, incapacitating him. Matasareanu finally surrendered. When the agents surrounded Matasareanu, he dared them to kill him. At 10:01 a.m., he finally died from trauma caused by excessive blood loss from 2 gunshot wounds in his left thigh. This happened before an ambulance arrived on the scene, which was called by the cops, but paramedics have a strict policy against going into a hot zone, which means an active area. There were reports of a third suspect still at large, maybe still inside the bank, and this was possibly confusion caused by carjack victim William Marr getting reported to 911. This tragic gun battle in North Hollywood left a trail of pain that affected many families. In addition, the repercussions sparked a series of controversies that led to discussion and reflection within society. It also turned the corner on law enforcement and the weapons they need to bring criminals to justice. Phillips and Matasareanu fired approximately 1,100 rounds, most of their bullets blasting out at 10 rounds a second. The LAPD's initial firepower was practically like bringing a knife to a gunfight. Miraculously, 12 police officers and 8 civilians were injured and survived, the only fatalities being the 2 robbers. At 44 minutes, the North Hollywood Shootout is one of the longest gun battles in the history of LA's urban warfare. In direct response, LAPD patrol officers acquired 600 semi-automatic M16s in September of 1997, U.S. Army surplus weapons donated by the Pentagon. That's it for today's video. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, here at the C.R.U.S.H unit, we educate our viewers on gang and criminal culture with a strong message of unity. C.R.U.S.H, Community Resources Uniting Street Hoodlums. Stop the killing. Peace.